Episode 5 March 2025 Earth. A meteorite falls from the sky at Emperor Mountain. The great swordsmith forges Tulangjuan swords. The previous chapter mentioned that MUI Guamu and then any Ansangzu were to forge a sword each. This chapter will tell the story of forging Mista Dragon mysterious swords. It was half a year before the lost Seashell Mars spacecraft made an emergency landing. In March 2025, MUI Guamu and Deneni Ansangzu's off-road vehicle left the Tohoku Expressway at Tochigi and got off the highway at Nasu Plateau and entered the national highway. After entering the deep mountains of Nikko, they turned into the forest road and arrived at the Masake entrance, where they parked the car. After hiking for more than an hour, they arrived at the center of the Nikko Mountains, which is Emperor Mountain. At the foot of Emperor Mountain, they met the great swordsmith for the first time. The great swordsmith was a tall and thin old man who lived alone in a cave under a cliff, more than 100 meters away. There is a waterfall, and more than 20 meters away from the waterfall, there is a flat open space, which is where the great swordsmith forges swords. There, he uses a furnace made of earth to smelt iron ore into iron, and uses a hammer to forge iron into steel and forge it into a sword. According to the villagers, the great swordsmith is often seen climbing cliffs, cutting down trees growing from the cracks in the rocks, and using a knife that he has collected and never shown to others to cut the tree trunks into wooden swords. He calls himself a Waizai. Some people believe that he is immortal, and some say that he is the reincarnation of Uwaigi. But some people say that he is old and can't remember anything, and he is talking nonsense. In short, no one knows how old he is, where he came from, and who he is. His sword is a household legend in the mountains in this area. Many years ago, there were many animals that became spirits in the mountains within a radius of 100 miles. Those oblins lived in dense forests. They often come out. Some of them capture children. Some turn into beautiful women and make men follow them into the dense forest. Some cast mist to make villagers sick. It was at that time that people met the great swordsmith in the cave. The great swordsmith said to the villagers, "Take the sword back to the village, and everything will be fine." Then, there were really no monsters in that village. Later, there were too many people who went into the mountains to ask him for swords, and some people lived in the caves, helping him when he was forging swords, and waiting for him to make the swords. Since then, the monsters disappeared. Ask the villagers, "Is the legend true?" The villagers said that there are not many wild animals in the mountains now. So where are the monsters? Medicine has also developed. If you get sick, go to the hospital. Who still believes in those superstitious methods. It's just a legend. However, until now, his black handmade iron sword and hand-carved wooden sword are still scarce. Locals have to make reservations, and tourists from other places can't buy them at all. Ask a villager who brought rice and fish to the great swordsmith. Has he always been here alone? The villager said that he had 5 apprentices, all of whom went out to do their own business, and some were still abroad, and they were all famous as wordsmiths. Those apprentices would sometimes be called back by him, and 6 people would forge a sword. The great swordsmith told MUI Guangwu and then any Ansangzu that sword making required a lot of raw materials. He made a list and gave it to them, telling them that 1 month later, on the first day of the lunar calendar, the furnace would be opened to forge swords. By then, his apprentices would also be back. He told them to be sure to transport the raw materials here during this period. For more than 2 months, MUI Guangwu and then any Ansangzu, with an expedition team, traveled around the world. Because the great swordsmith did not explain when he gave them the list, and only told them to go and find it, they suffered a lot. Although there was no iron steel in the list, they guessed that it must be made of local iron sand. But they still deliberately collected the beautifully patterned Utsi steel from the Inca continent and the jade steel for making Japanese swords during the expedition and brought them back. May 2025 AD. Mount Tashi. On this day, when the furnace was about to be opened, the great swordsmith carefully looked at the various raw materials placed on the ground, then pointed at the steel and said, "These steels are not good. You go out to find them again." Everyone in the expedition team was about to collapse. Someone asked, "Where to find it and what kind to find?" The great swordsmith pointed to the southeast and said lightly, "Just go find it. You will recognize it when you see it." After a simple meeting, the expedition team formed the strongest camp since its establishment, divided the team members into 3 groups, and searched all night. The first group of people took a helicopter to search between the mountains of Nikko, and were ready to provide air transportation services at any time. The second group of people took an off-road vehicle to search the periphery of the Nikko Mountains and were ready to provide road transportation services. The third group of personnel walked around the Emperor's Mountain Inn prepared to provide manual transportation services. At night, when the expedition members were searching aimlessly, a white light broke through the night sky, and the vast area of the northeast was illuminated as if it were daytime. A meteorite fell from the sky. The helicopter of the first group arrived at the landing point of the meteorite first. It was the river beach of the Tang River in the battlefield. A large area of sand and gravel with weeds around it was burned black and still smoking. A large piece of meteorite that was still emitting a dark red light in the center. The meteorite fell from the sky, and the great swordsmith knew about it in advance. Who is this person? And Enion Songzu said, I can't care so much now. This is it. Wait until it cools down. Dig it up. Transport it back and complete the mission. Emiwa Iguamu said. While waiting for the meteorite to cool down, the off-road vehicle of the second group also rushed over. Emiwa Iguamu walked from the place where the meteorite fell to the Tang River and observed the surroundings. When he returned to the meteorite, he saw that everyone was still watching. He stretched out his hand to test it, and the meteorite was no longer hot. Why don't you lift it out of the pit? He asked. I try, but it's too heavy. I can't lift it. It doesn't move at all. Said Enion Songzu. Someone has gone back to the car to find tools. Get out of the way. Let me try. Emiwa Iguamu looked at the size of the meteorite, rolled up his sleeves, stood firmly, bent down, put his hands under the meteorite, and shouted, Come out. He exerted force on his waist and legs, but the meteorite didn't move at all. The onlookers couldn't help laughing. Don't just watch the fun. Come and help. Emiwa Iguamu called everyone. When Emiwa Iguamu used both hands to lift it up, the other male team members helped with their hands, but the meteorite still didn't move at all. The team members who went back to the car to find tools drove the car over. They tied one end of the wire rope to the meteorite and the other end to the tow hook of the off-road vehicle. The off-road vehicle was in low gear and stepped on the throttle. The engine roared and the tires emitted green smoke under the friction of the sand and gravel. The meteorite did not move at all. With a bang, the wire rope broke. The team members looked at the meteorite and talked about it. Some people said that the meteorite was heavier than ordinary iron, and some people said that the meteorite should be in the shape of a long cannonball, with the pointed bottom deeply embedded in the sand and gravel. A team member suggested hanging the wire rope on the helicopter and using the helicopter to pull it up. Don't come up with a bad idea. The meteorite was not pulled out, and the helicopter crashed. Let's try digging with a shovel. Emiwa Iguamu said. So one team member took a shovel and dug the hard sand and gravel under the meteorite. And another team member found a pikusk and tried to pry it with the pikusk. The team members watching nearby discussed what other methods there were. A team member half-jokingly said, I know. When the ocean-origin fishing boats go out to sea to fish, the captains have to pray. Because there was no prayer, the meteorite did not move. Everyone began to agree. Yes, and Enion Songzu, this meteorite is for you to forge a sword. You pray to it and ask it to be obedient and follow us. It must work. And Enion Songzu said thoughtfully, I really forgot about this. Legend has it that praying to a meteorite can make your wishes come true. You move aside. I will do it. And Enion Songzu faced the meteorite, put his hands together, and prayed, Meteorite, meteorite, I don't know where you come from, but I know your destination. You are the iron for my sword. Meteorite, listen to my orders. Meet the master quickly, and go home with me. Mui Iguamu, who was standing outside the circle, asked, What's going on? And Enion Songzu was about to say, You should pray too, when the team member holding the pikusk shouted, It's moving, it's moving. Emiwa Iguamu stood firmly, bent down, put his hands under the meteorite, and said, Get up. With the force from his waist and legs, he easily carried the meteorite out of the crater and lifted it to his shoulders. He tried to walk forward a few steps and gently put the meteorite down. I'll leave it to you. Carry it to the plane. And Enion Songzu, who was squatting on the ground and still studying the crater, shouted to Emiwa Iguamu, I know what's going on. Emiwa Iguamu heard the sound and came to see that Enion Songzu was using a small iron shovel to dig the soil around the meteorite with a broken surface. She said, Look, this meteorite is gourd-shaped. The small ball on the ground, and the big ball below hit the ground. No wonder it didn't move. It heard my prayer and broke in the middle. You are so awesome. Yuai said. Are you going to dig the big one left in the ground? And Enion Somzu asked. Yuai took the small iron shovel, tried to dig deeper for a while, and said, the meteorite buried below seems to be quite large. Somzie Chaizu. Why don't you pray again and ask it to jump out? Okay? And Enion Somzu said, I have prayed one out. This one is your turn. Please. Yuai was helpless and said, don't laugh at me if the prayer doesn't work. He followed Enion Somzu's example. Facing the meteorite, clasped his hands together, and pray, meteorite, meteorite. I don't know where you come from, but I know your destination. You are the iron I used to forge swords. Meteorite, listen to my order. Meet the master quickly, and go home with me. Just when Yuai was about to make a helpless gesture to Enion Somzu, the scene in front of them stunned them with a loud click. A crack appeared on the cross-section of the meteorite, and bluish-white smoke came out from it. The two discussed and decided that the one they transported back should be enough. The one below was too heavy to be dug out, and the helicopter couldn't carry it at once, and the off-road vehicle could only carry it to the trailhead. It's too late today, so let's cover the bottom with soil first and come back to dig later. So when Enion Somzu continued to pray, meteorite, meteorite, I don't know where you come from, but I know your destination. You are the iron for my sword, and I am your master. Meteorite, listen to my order. You hide underground first. Don't stick your head out. Wait for me to pick you up, please. Yuai shoveled soil with a shovel to cover the meteorite, and camouflaged it with stones and weeds. The meteorite iron was transported back, and the great swordsmith turned it over and over to look carefully, shouting, finally I've waited for you. Open the furnace, and the sword. When forging the sword, there are two kinds of water for quenching. One is melted snow transported from Kyanzuyu Mountain, soaked in the snow lotus of Kyanzuyu Mountain. The other is ice from Antarctica, melted by the great swordsmith himself. Another kind is taken from each of the 5 lakes around Mount Fuji, soaked in the cherry blossoms on the lakeside and transported back. The water used to grind the sword body is Antarctic ice, which was melted by the great swordsmith himself. The sword body and the scabbard are inlaid with 7 gems arranged in the order of the Big Dipper, namely, white crystal, fluorite, tourmaline, jade, Iceland spy, ruby, and diamond. August 2025 AD, the day when the sword was finished, Emperor Shimaunten, the great swordsmith handed the 2 swords to apprentices respectively, and asked them to try whether the swords were sharp. The 2 men moved around among the pre-prepared bamboo, ice, hemp-rope and scarecrow, slashed left and right, and returned the swords to the great swordsmith with satisfaction. The great swordsmith put the tip of the sword against the boulder and pressed the sword body, and the sword almost bent into a circle. Everyone was so nervous that they could hardly breathe. The great swordsmith let go and let everyone see that the sword had restored its shape and was still as straight as before. The great swordsmith asked everyone to step back, took a long piece of woodsy steel and placed it on the boulder, took a sword, raised it high, and chopped it down harder, and the woodsy steel broke with a sound. He took another long piece of jade steel and placed it on the boulder, took another sword, raised it high, and chopped it down harder, and the jade steel broke with a sound. Yuai and Enion Somzu checked the blades of the 2 swords, and breathed a sigh of relief after confirming that they were intact. The great swordsmith held a sword in each hand and jumped onto the cliff. While climbing up, he waved his 2 swords, and the trees, leaves, branches and trunks on the cliff turned into debris and fell like snowflakes. Suddenly, a gust of cold wind blew from the horizon, and when everyone looked, the sky above the sword-making field was covered with dark clouds as heavy as lead, like a huge spaceship. Before people could react, the charcoal around the sword-making furnace was blown away, and the wooden barrel filled with water was blown over and rolled on the ground. Everyone shouted for the great sword-making master to come down quickly, and several apprentices ran to the cliff to meet him. At this time, a huge lightning suddenly struck from the center of the dark clouds in the sky. People saw that the great sword-making master was already standing on the top of the cliff, and the 2 swords in his hands were like red-hot here, emitting a dark red light. Amid the rumbling thunder, a rough and huge voice came from the black clouds. Lord of all things in the heavens and wilderness, why do you abandon us? This sword has made us wait for tens of millions of years. How can those mortals use your magic sword? Just lend it to your disciples. A whirlwind suddenly blew up from the ground on the sword testing field, and the two scabbards on the wooden rack were rolled up by the whirlwind and flew high into the sky. The sudden change shocked everyone, and the first to react was MUI Guangwu. He saw that the scabbard had risen to the halfway point of the cliff, and he quickly wanted to run to the cliff and climb to the top of the cliff, and Enion Songzu followed closely behind, and the two disciples of the great swordsmith picked up a bundle of ropes and followed behind, ready to support. At this time, the great swordsmith shouted, "Don't move!" Everyone looked in the direction of the sound, and the great swordsmith on the top of the cliff pulled out two swords from the waterfall and jumped into the air. The great swordsmith shouted, "You bold lunatic! Since you are here, you should be happy to have a new junior brothers and sisters, but you actually talked about the master and snatched the magic sword. Get out quickly, or you will be destroyed." The great swordsmith was in the air, and the two swords crossed above his head to draw across. Everyone looked in the direction of the sound, and saw two swords and two scabbards, each emitting 7 different colored lights. Those beams of the same color connected to each other, interweaving a cubic net in the air, wrapped in a faint blue halo. As the swords and scabbards fell, they looked like an animal with life and light. In the center of the rolling black cloud in the sky, a lightning bolt broke out, and a rough voice echoed between heaven and earth, "Brother and sister, lend me your swords when we meet in the future." "Master, I'm going back." The dark cloud dissipated. The great swordsmith was wrapped in the water flow of the waterfall and fell into the deep pool. The whirlwind that rolled up the scabbard disappeared without a trace, and the scabbard fell like a leaf in the wind, and was caught by Enion Songzu. The great swordsmith was pulled up from the pool by his apprentice and changed into wet clothes. Everyone gathered around and looked carefully at the two swords. It seemed that there was a faint quenching pattern, and there was nothing else unusual. The 7 gems inlaid on the sword body and scabbard in the arrangement of the Big Dipper, although pure and beautiful, no longer shine, and there is nothing special about them compared to common gems. An apprentice asked the great swordsmith, "What was that just now?" The great swordsmith pointed to the sky and said lightly, "It was just an illusion created by a small time and space thief. There is no need to panic." When everyone looked, the dark cloud above their heads, which looked like a huge spaceship, split into 4 pieces from the center and scattered to the surroundings. Before they could think about the great swordsmith's words, the great swordsmith began to show the two swords and announced loudly, "Uaizi, I used the black iron from heaven to forge 3 swords. The first one was the Long Quan sword, which killed hundreds of weapons and killed heroes in the world. Now it is nowhere to be found. These 2 swords, infused with the sword soul of the Long Quan sword, are even more out of the original power. You call it Long Zhuan, the 7-star Long Zhuan sword. Long Zhuan was born, relying on the original power, piercing the heaven and earth, and cutting the ancient to wilderness." The great swordsmith asked MUI Guangwu and Dan, "Enion Songzu, come forward and fill several large bowls with wine." He put a bowl of wine into the sky, a bowl of wine to the earth, and a bowl of wine on the scabbard and the sword. MUI Guangwu, and then Enion Songzu each drank a bowl of white wine. The great swordsmith said to the 2 people, "Through the wine just now, you have made a contract with the sword. From today on, you are the owners of these 2 swords and the guardians of the sword. Remember, the sword is only loyal to his master." The great swordsmith handed a sheath sword to Enion Songzu. "This sword is called Hua. It belongs to you." The great swordsmith handed a sheath sword to MUI Guangwu. "This sword is called Ying, and it belongs to you." The 2 of them could finally sit down and slowly admire their own swords. Enion Songzu drew out her sword, and the sword body was engraved with the word Hua. The sword body with the green light was covered with snow lotus pattern. It was indeed a rare treasure. They sighed secretly. MUI Guangwu drew out his sword, and the sword body was engraved with the word Yang. The sword body with a cold light was covered with cherry blossom patterns. What a temperamental sword! But shouldn't it be given to Enion Songzu? Why give it to me? MUI Guangwu thought secretly. That day, the great swordsmith told them that he would go out. There is a river called Yinmalanghe in Kunlun continent. There is a Yuki Fairy mountain on the riverside. There is a place called Qian Temple on the mountain. If you want to find him, you can go there.